Good evening and welcome to this meeting of Troy City Council. It is Monday, November 7th, 2022 at 7 p.m. My name is William Lutz, President of Council. For folks that are standing in the back, it does look like we have a few chairs up front if you wish to come in and take a seat.
Just like school.
Yes, we have a few seats up front if you would like to come up and take a seat. This time I will lead us in the invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Please bow our head. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this beautiful day, and thank you for this wonderful community, which we are all blessed to call home. Lord, tonight, as this council takes up decisions, help us act with courage and wisdom and with honesty. And Lord, help us to always take care of the least and the last and the lost among us. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'll ask Mrs. Knight to please call the roll.
Mr. Pierce.
Present.
Mr. Twiss.
Here.
Mr. Schilling.
Present.
Mr. Sievert.
Present.
Mr. Whidden.
Here.
Mr. Rozelle.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mrs. Snee. Here. Mrs. Marshall.
Move to excuse Mrs. Marshall.
Second.
It has been moved to excuse Mrs. Marshall by Mr. Sievert, seconded by Mrs. Snee. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Twiss.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
No.
Yes.
What did you just say?
Yes, I vote to excuse
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall is excused.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read a summary of the minutes of the October 17th, 2022 meeting of Troy City Council?
Members of Council, October 17, 2022. The members of the incoming Youth Council were introduced. Committee reports. Community and Economic Development Committee reported on a meeting regarding membership of the Planning Commission, noted that the meeting purpose was to hear comments and no recommendation would be made at this time. Recreation and Parks Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing Park Board to transfer Waco Park to the Community Improvement Corporation. Streets and Sidewalks Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing grant application associated with the Experiment Farm Road resurfacing project. Resolution number R67, 2022, application regarding Experiment Farm Road project, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 055, 2022, regarding Park Board transferring Waco Park to Community Improvement Corporation, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 056, 2022, a reappropriation, was given first reading and adopted. Following comments, council adjourned at 7:35 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. How does council wish to act on the minutes?
Move to adopt. Second.
It's been moved to adopt the minutes of the October 17th meeting by Mr. Twiss, seconded by Mr. Rozelle. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Twiss.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the minutes of the October 31st, 2022 special meeting of Troy City Council?
October 31, 2022, special session of council. The special notice meeting was read and was signed. Council adjourned to an executive session and then came back into the special session. There was a motion regarding permitting comments, and that was approved. Law and Ordinance Committee recommended that legislation be prepared authorizing the director to enter into an agreement with the law firm of Jackson Lewis PC, an agreement with the law firm of Buckley King, and to file a notice of appeal only if another party filed a notice of appeal regarding a trial court's decision. There were comments made regarding the agenda items. Resolution number R68, 2022, employed legal counsel for employment services, was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R69, 2022, employed counsel of Buckley King, was given first reading and failed suspension. Resolution number R70, notice of filing of appeal, was given first reading and failed suspension. Following comments, council adjourned at 7:14 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. How's council wish to act on the minutes?
Move to adopt.
A second.
It's been moved to adopt the minutes of the special meeting of October 31st, 2022 by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mr. Rozell.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We'll move on to committee reports. We have 3 reports this evening. We'll begin with the Finance Committee and Mr. Sievert.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. On October 24th, this committee met to consider the subordination of the mortgage lien position of an existing loan from the Small Business Development Revolving Loan Fund made to 107 West Main LLC for the property located at 107 West Main Street. The subordination has been recommended by the Loan Review Committee. This will allow the owner to secure additional funding from Minster Bank to fund second-floor renovations. This city's loan will be adequately secured. This does not commit any additional city funds. Therefore, it is the recommendation that this legislation be prepared approving the requested mortgage lien subordination for the SBD loan made to 107 West Main LLC and authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to sign a subordination agreement that will include the mortgage and assignment of rents with Minster Bank regarding the property located at 107 West Main Street. The committee supports emergency legislation as the closing of the bank financing is pending and the approval of the subordination of the city's mortgage is required before the closing can take place. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Rozell, myself as chairman of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Sievert. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll go to the Law and Ordinance Committee and Mrs. Snee.
Thank you, Mr. President. This committee met on October 24th to consider a request for support of the C1 and C2 Trex liquor permit application of Shakti Petroleum LLC for their new location at 959 North Market Street. This committee concurs that this would be an economic development project with the creation of 5 new jobs and recommends that a letter of support be submitted by the Director of Public Service and Safety for the C1 and C2 Trex liquor permit application as requested by Shakti Petroleum LLC for their new location at 959 North Market Street, Troy, Ohio. As this is not a matter of legislation, this committee asks that this recommendation to support the Trex application be accepted by council so that a letter can be provided to be included in the application that the applicant will submit to the Division of Liquor Control. This is respectfully submitted by Mr. Phillips, Mr. Sievert, and myself as chair. And Mr. President, I would move that council accept this recommendation regarding the Trex application.
Second.
There is a motion to approve the report for the Trex application by Mrs. Snee, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mr. Rozell.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mrs. Snee.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Twist.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mr. Sievert.
Yes.
The motion is approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. I will have the final report this evening for the Council of the Whole work session that took place on October 31st. Council President Lutz chaired a council work session on October 31st, 2022 to hear a presentation from Eric Anderson of KZF Design regarding City of Troy streetscape options and to discuss those options. All members of council participated in the work session. The purpose of the work session was to provide council with general information regarding options for the project scope and very early cost estimates and to seek council direction and guidance for the project, which includes expansion of the streetscape and needed safety features. The project is to be designed in 2023 for construction in 2024 and 2025. Following the presentation, council provided direction as discussed in the detailed report. Respectfully submitted, Mrs. Marshall, Mr. Rozell, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Pierce, Mr. Schilling, Mr. Sievert, Mrs. Snee, Mr. Twist, and Mr. Whidden. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, that ends our reports for the evening. We will go on to citizen comments for items on the agenda. We've heard 3 reports this evening. We have 2 resolutions and 2 ordinances. If you wish to address council on any of those items, you're invited to come to the podium, give your name and address, and you have 2 minutes. Mr. Kerber is our timekeeper.
Good evening, Ben Southerly, Troy Historic Preservation Alliance, 110.5 West Main Street. Some questions need to be asked tonight and should be answered before council votes on R69 2022 and R70 2022. Mr. Kimmel, at last week's meeting, a very generous offer was made to repair the parapet of your building at no charge to you so that the sidewalk can finally be reopened after nearly 3 years in exchange for a promise not to demolish the building. Are you willing to accept this offer? Mayor Oda, at last week's meeting, you were asked to convene a group of stakeholders to collaborate on ways that we can resolve the impasse and figure out how to fix the 112 to 118 building and move on. Are you willing to give collaboration a try?
That has been done. I am not willing to step into a private property owner's business, and we have worked with him. I'm not willing to do that.
At the October 24th Council Committee meeting on this topic, the attorney for the owner of 112 to 118 West Main Street said that a boutique hotel is planned for this site. A downtown hotel requires lots of parking. Mr. Titterington, has the city made promises to convert public parking spaces into hotel parking if this project moves forward?
The zoning of that property does not require dedicated parking. We have discussed it, but no, we've not made any promises, nor has there been any commitments by council or the administration yet at this time.
From the day after the tornado struck, certain city officials have been committed to demolishing this building despite its extraordinary history and despite this recent development involving code enforcement. Why is that? One has to step back and ask the question.
Thank you, Mr. Southerly.
My name is Derek Muncie, attorney for 116 West Main LLC. As previously expressed, 116 West Main has executed a contract with the buyer contingent on demolition. It is our intent to fulfill our contractual obligations. Under the current contract, the hotel will be built in its place in compliance with the Historic District and Riverfront Overlay Code. 116 West and the buyer are willing to discuss options or alternatives to commemorate and reuse materials of the site in a way that will allow 116 West to fulfill its obligations under its current contract. Prior to filing of any demolition application, alternatives to demolition were explored with 2 prospective buyers, both who walked away when they realized that the cost would be at great expense to the public and could not be completed without great expense to the public. Both parties walked away. Remains a position of 116 West that demolition will provide the best win-win solution for all downtown stakeholders, not just a select, loud few. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Muncie. Anyone else wish to address council on these resolutions and ordinances?
Chris Manning, Director, Overfield Tavern Museum, 201 East Water Street. Continuing from Mr. Sudley, from the day after the tornado struck, the city has been committed to demolishing the building despite its extraordinary history and despite this recent development involving code enforcement. Why is that? One has to step back and ask the question. Mr. Titterington, did certain city officials ask the owners of 112, 118 West Main Street not to fix up the building back in 2020?
Did we ask the property owners not to fix the building? No, we did not.
Council, tonight you have the opportunity to weigh in on this debacle with the message, enough is enough. Troy city government is supposed to look out for the best interests of our historic downtown. That public trust has been betrayed by certain city leaders. Tonight, you can begin restoring that trust. Vote no on further participation in an effort to tear down one of Troy and Miami County's most historic buildings. Finally, for the benefit of the audience, could someone please explain the difference between R69-2022 and R70-2022? Hypothetically, if only R69-2022 is passed by the council, to what extent could the city participate in an appeal of the trial court's decision to the 2nd District Court of Appeals? Also, has the city already incurred more than $50,000 in expenses for this case, even though the council has not yet authorized spending beyond that threshold?
Good evening, council members. My name is Jeremy Tome. I'm at 124 West Main, a building directly adjacent to the building that you're considering demolition. I want to start out by talking about bullies. The mayor called me and the people in this room bullies. We are people that are exercising our rights to speak and be heard in this room. And I find it morally offensive. I don't even know of another elected official at your position that calls their own citizenry bullies. That shows you, that demonstrates what demonstrates her leadership and what she thinks of her citizens and what her staff thinks of her citizens. This is the second case in as many years that I've taken to the Common Pleas Court to overturn this staff's poor decision-making, their illegal decision-making. I've won both. I'm 100% right now. And I have 2 more cases if my clients had the money to pay me to take it to court. Now, they don't care because it doesn't cost them anything. I think they even kind of laugh about how much money it costs my clients to overturn this. And they want you to approve more money to fund an out-of-town derelict business owner to demolish a building, and the only people that are trying to stop it are your citizens. And we're doing it with the law, Mayor. I won over there in the court, and I'm going to win the Court of Appeals, and no amount of money is going to change the law.
Well, Alabama 105 Crestwood Drive. Mayor Oda, I tell you, you like sticking your foot in your throat, don't you? Yeah. You really like sticking your foot in your throat because you really did it last time. But I'm not going to talk about you anymore. As far as I'm concerned, you're a non-issue. I want to know why, in 2018, when Mr. Kimmel purchased this building, why he has been allowed to let it sit in a derelict condition since 2018. It wasn't just it wasn't just because of the tornado. It goes back further than that. Mr. Titterington, have you caused any property maintenance violations to be filed against this gentleman in 2018? Yes or no?
You're supposed to be answering questions? Or?
Yes, I would like you to answer that question, Mr. Titterington. I think you owe the citizens that much.
I will answer the fact that since 2018, from 2018 to 2021, we did not have any cause to file any property maintenance because he did not have any exterior property maintenance issues that rose to the level of violating.
Oh, really? Oh, really? That building has been sitting vacant for 5 years, Mr. Titterington. That's got to be one of the biggest darn lies you have ever told, sir. You can shout me down if you want to, I don't care. Because this has been a debacle from the beginning. You guys have mishandled it, and if it wasn't for Mr. Lutz, you probably would still be mishandling it. Now, I am asking you council members to stop the charade. If this man is going to carry out this appeal, he should be made to pay for it. 150%. Stop it, end it now.
Anyone else wish to address council this evening?
My name is Steve Justice. I'm a Troy resident and a lawyer who operates out of a building at 210 West Main Street. I must tell my colleagues here tonight that it saddens me, first of all, to hear the level of rhetoric that's being expressed. The personal accusations are beyond what I would consider professional. One of the things that I love about our community and the people who live in Troy is we've always understood that Troy was about more than just Troy and its citizens. We've always understood that Troy was the county seat for all of Miami County. And we've appreciated the fact that people who don't necessarily live within the Troy city limits, I'm sure many of whom are behind me tonight, care about the city of Troy. So whether someone lives inside Troy or lives outside Troy should not matter to this body. What matters is that we live in Miami County, and we care about what happens in Troy. And so we should set aside comments about somebody living out of town or doing, who doesn't live within the city limits. I confess to you that we are bigger than that. Every person in this room matters and should be respected and treated with respect. And so I'm saddened to hear some of the people behind me stand up tonight and say the things that they've already said. I would tell you this as well. With respect to this pending lawsuit and the appeal which has already been initiated, I think it's important for council to understand that if its decision to participate in this appeal is somehow based on the incurrence of attorney's fees, I don't see how the city of Troy avoids being involved.
Thank you, Mr. Kerber. Thank you, Mr. Justice.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments.
Good evening. I'm Martin Stewart, 1486 Cheshire Road, Troy Historical Society, Troy Historical Preservation Alliance. I didn't really put together any notes, but it occurs to me that I don't know how many years ago it was that the question was up in the air as to whether or not the courthouse that we now have should be saved. I don't know how many millions of dollars was spent to renovate it. The statues were redone, et cetera, et cetera. It's a huge amount of money. And it was brought up that, we'd probably be better off just to knock it down and put up a more efficient building, energy efficient building, which would, square footage wise, would make more sense. Now, does anybody sitting here wish we had done that? Yeah, there was more money to be made, and maybe it was more efficient to do it modern, but you know what? The soul wasn't there. There's a soul in this building, and I don't care how many plaques you put up and how many words you write. The impact of actually standing in the building where the Randolph slaves were, where Barton Kyle was, where the Civil War soldiers were, where all these things occurred, it's not going to be the same. I don't care what you put up. So, the gentleman's right, it's not about money. So let's not make it about money, let's make it about saving a vital part of the city. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address council? Please come forward, give your name and address, you have 2 minutes.
I'm Michael R. Fox, live 312 West Simpson in Troy. I would like to say one thing about being members of this council and the mayor and everything. If you have never lived here your whole life and you came from other towns and haven't been raised here, this is just another building to you. And the gentleman over here, I think, has little caring about the community and how important this building is. I was in there in the 1950s when Catherine McNeil had the Flesh Restaurant, went up there every day and had something to eat. It is a very holy, sacred thing. It is a part of your fabric when you live here. And once you tear something down like that, it's going forever. And to do that, just because someone wants to make a profit on it and build something that probably isn't going to be that relevant to any other little small town store. This is such a wonderful piece of history right here. And then I have people tell me that it would cost a small fortune to fix it up. That's not so. There's a lot of volunteers here that would help them fix it up. And it's absolutely deplorable that I have a mayor and a city manager that let this gentleman get by with letting that thing in such a bad state of repair, have people walk around it for 2 years, lose all of our parking in an important area, and all of the legal things that's went into that building over the past 150-plus years, to sit there and erase it because someone wants to tear it down and build a modern facility, and to have people here that weren't born and raised here, they don't care about it. But to us people that lived here our whole life, that is a very sacred building to us. It's a piece of our fabric, and you should save it at all costs and have this thing repaired. And I hope that you use common sense and not listen to one guy and listen to the majority of people here that want to save it.
Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Howdy, Duffy Garber, a resident.
Can we have your address, please?
What's that?
Can we have your address, please?
Yeah, 133 Plum.
Okay.
I'll stay away from the ad hominems here because that's what I don't like about processes like this. I do want to ask questions. Number one being, why hasn't that sidewalk been taken care of? That's just, out in front of Chuck and Patty's place. That's basically just an obstruction for people to walk on. So I would ask that question. And then why hasn't anything been done about that? Because I want to know. So can anybody on council answer that? Does anybody want to?
Enforcement has been filed this week.
I'm sorry?
Patrick can talk. Enforcement has been filed this week.
Meaning that it will be fixed?
Well,
I can't go
that's
in.
up to the property owner, but,
Yeah.
so we had filed, I'm going to take more than 2 minutes, but.
That's okay.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, I'm going to take more than 2 minutes, but the tornado happened early in 2020. We began discussing options with the property owner. The insurance company, of course, they had to settle. And by that time, we, as somebody mentioned earlier, began to evaluate different possible renovations and rehab projects. This was not a demolition project from 2020. There was a lot that went on between 2020 and the middle of 21. Each one of those development projects had purchase contracts. They had due diligence of 2 to 3 months. I want to say at least 3 months. In some cases, at least one of the cases, I believe, longer than that.
I hope I'm not losing my time here, though.
No. Go ahead.
Once those were exhausted is when the demolition application process began, at which time we stayed the property maintenance after discussing with the law director, and then up until this point, there were no property maintenance issues to enforce except for the building code issue, the safety issue, and in this, the property owner in discussing with the county building official, the fencing went up to safeguard the sidewalk. Fast forward, the case has been decided at the common pleas level. Yes, it's been filed for notice into appeals by the property owner, but in further consultation with the law director, that's when we determined that we needed to file property maintenance orders back with the property owner, which we did last Thursday. The property maintenance orders require action or some kind of a plan within 30 days. And so that's where we sit, that's where the clock is ticking. Whether the property owner complies voluntarily, we'll continue to have any discussions that we can with them, but it is up to them, and they do have the 30-day window as of last Thursday.
So coming out of the area of asking questions then to the legal defense, may I address them or no?
No, let's just keep your questions.
Okay, then I would ask of the legal defense, what are your plans with it? And I don't expect them to come back and redress, but do you have plans to fix that so our sidewalks can be? Because listen, this gets knocked down, it doesn't get knocked down, I really don't care. I'd like to have a nice new hotel that goes with the code and all that stuff, I don't care. It's more business, whatever. That's just sitting defunct. Save a property all you want. I'm not here for that. I'm here to say that's been going on too long, and they should address that, and that should be enforced. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to address council?
I'm Jessica Meinsinger. I'm owner of Troyland Development, co-owner of Pop-Up at 4 West Main. My office is at 7 South Plum Street. And I don't envy you council members. I mean, you're in a really difficult position, and the decision that you make on this building is really precedent-setting for the downtown. It's opening Pandora's box. And I hope that before you expend any further legal fees, that you will really consider the proposal of putting together a stakeholder group. You know, the property owner has a right to do what the property owner wants to do. But before the city takes this any further, I would really ask you to reach out to the community. For those of us that have been developing, run businesses in Troy for 25 years, own businesses downtown, have the development, the financial acumen to help the city brainstorm this, to work through this. There's a lot of desire to redevelop this within the community. There's funds to do that. There's talent to do that. So I would really urge you to think about that before you vote to expend any additional legal funds to set a really dangerous precedent in our historic district.
Anyone else wish to address council?
Hey, good evening. My name's Tom DeMange, 2790 Southside Drive in Troy. Business doesn't come, new businesses, if you're looking like me to put a new business downtown potentially sometime, these new businesses don't come downtown for a hotel. If they wanted to put a business beside a hotel, they'd put one down by the highway. What they do come downtown for is for the downtown charm. So the fine gentleman behind me also marginalized the voice of a loud few. Well, there's more than a few here tonight, and you should take their downtown investments very seriously. Imagine a downtown Troy without some of the business owners here tonight. Lastly, I agree that more than Troy citizens can provide good input, but this is a matter of our taxpayer dollars, and those should be considered with priority. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a gentleman in the back. Yes, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Tom Tweed. I own a farm at 3070 East Route 55. That's a Troy address. It's in both Lost Creek and Elizabeth Townships. And this relates to what you heard already regarding insurance and pride of ownership. I own a barn on this farm that's probably built in the 1850s by a guy named Thomas Jefferson Sayers. Part of the original Sayers family. And just this spring, there was a big windstorm, blew the doors off this barn. The insurance company rapidly gave me a check. I spent all of that check, plus several thousands more out of my own pocket, because I'm proud of owning this barn built by Thomas Jefferson Sayers. It's probably as old as the courthouse behind the Oddfellows Hall. And that's my question to the current owner. Where's your pride of ownership? You got the insurance money. You know, maybe you're being kind of fair and say, oh, that's a write-off, that's a terrible investment, knock it down. Same question, where's your pride of ownership? My first memories in this world are looking out the house door at this big barn. You're all welcome to contact me, I'll give you a tour of it. the size of the beams in this barn. Also, you can find trees today to hand square to build 56-foot long beams, a foot square. I think there's 9 of them, 9 horizontals. I'll give you a tour. I'll be quiet now. But again, I paid all the insurance money and my own thousands of dollars because of that pride of ownership. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to address council? Seeing none, we'll move on to resolutions. I'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the first resolution of the evening, Resolution R69, 2022.
Resolution number R69, 2022. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to employ legal counsel of Buckley King and declaring an emergency. This is for services during 2022, second reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Rozell?
No.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes. 3 reading rule has been suspended. How does council wish to act?
Move to adopt.
Second.
It's been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Any final comments or questions?
Just to clarify, this is for services rendered, correct?
Mrs. Knight has nodded her head yes.
Okay.
Services rendered during 2022.
Okay. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next resolution of the evening, Resolution R70, 2022.
Resolution number R70, 2022. Resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to file a notice of appeal to the decision and judgment entry of the Common Pleas Court of Miami County, Ohio, in reference to case number 21CV378 and declaring an emergency. This is the second reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
No.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
No.
Mr. Rozell?
No.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Resolution failed suspension.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the first ordinance of the evening? Ordinance 057, 2022.
Ordinance number 057, 2022. Ordinance subordinating a mortgage lien for 107 West Main LLC and declaring an emergency. This was reported on this evening. This is the first reading, and this will be at no additional commitment of city funds.
Move to suspend.
It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Rozell, seconded by, was it Mr. Whidden? Mr. Pierce, I'm sorry. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
3 reading rule has been suspended.
Move to adopt.
It's been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Whidden. Are there any final comments or questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the last ordinance of the evening, ordinance 058, 2022?
Ordinance number 058, 2022. Ordinance amending ordinance number 065, 2021, is amended by ordinance number 030, 2022, and ordinance number 056, 2022, appropriating funds necessary for the various departments and offices of the city of Troy, Ohio for the year 2022. This is the third routine reappropriation of the year. First reading.
Move for suspension.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the three reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
The three reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Twist. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Moving on to communications and announcements. Mrs. Knight, do we have any this evening?
No, sir.
Thank you. Moving to comments of officials. Mayor Oda.
I have nothing to say tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Director of Public Service and Safety, Mr. Titrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of announcements. First of all, the fire generator, the long-awaited one at Fire Station 1, has been delivered and has been set. It should be connected by the end of the week, which then allows the elevator people to come in and connect that to the generator and to the electric service. Once that's done, the fire chief and the staff will decide a good date for a dedication of the building. The other thing I would announce is that you might recall that probably September now, Council authorized the submittal of a Ohio Department of Natural Resources urban canopy restoration grant, a bunch of trees in different areas. It was a 50-50 match, $25,000 funding matched against $25,000 out of park funds. We did receive that, and so we will be funding, I apologize I didn't bring the number of trees, but it's quite a few trees. Either 30 or 50 comes to mind, but it's quite a few. So we were successful in getting that grant, so I wanted to announce that. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Director of Law, Mr. Kerber.
For the sky watchers out there, there's going to be a lunar eclipse tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., a full one, so you can get up early and check that out.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Kerber. City Auditor, Mr. Figgy, I bet you can't top that one.
Hey, let's top that one.
I have nothing at the time.
Thank you, Mr. Figgy. Do any council members have any comments this evening?
I have one.
Mr. Phillips
I got it
first.
real quick, just real quick.
Oh, Mr. Seaver, go ahead.
I want to apologize to all the people that are out there today. You deserve to have had a vote. The city council has not had the opportunity to talk on this issue at all. And I think it's important that we would have had that opportunity. It will now go moot. But that's the deference that this council has chosen. I think it's important that we remember that the Planning Commission and the BZA was made up of people who are citizens. I think it's important to remember that there is a rule of law that allows for administrative appeals, which also are followed by Court of Appeals, which is how everyone has found to this place. That said, we heard a lot of rhetoric today about property owners versus preservationists. That was not really the primary issue before the court or before us today. The issue before us today was whether taxpayer money should be used to further this litigation on behalf of the city of Troy. And for the record, I would have voted no because I don't think that that would have been a prudent use of taxpayer money. And I appreciate the crowd of everybody coming out here. You deserve to at least hear, in my opinion, what my vote would have been, and I wanted to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Sievert. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, sir. Last council meeting of October 31 was very illuminating in many ways, but what concerns me about that meeting was the conduct of the council president. Prior to council coming back into session, I advised the president of a motion I was going to make regarding public comments off of legislation before us. President Lutz became flummoxed at this and began looking for a copy of the council rules and procedures and asked me, don't the rules mean anything? Tossed down some paperwork onto his desk and then said, all right. I did tell President Lutz that I was aware of Rule 5 that he was looking for and advised him that our parliamentarian, the city attorney, Grant Kerber, had advised me of this procedure/motion. The tone and exasperated exchange was a bit edgy, but I dismissed it and moved on to the meeting. At the closing section of the council meeting, President Lutz then proceeded with a public statement, and the opening acknowledgement stated that he was bound by Rule 1 of Council Rules and Procedures, but then began a prepared statement doing the opposite and criticizing the administration of the issue being discussed that evening. As the de facto executive officer of this council, this was, in my opinion, a grave error in judgment, ineffective leadership, and probably was the most blatant act of political pandering I have ever witnessed in my 13 years on this body. I cannot sit by and let this behavior go uncommented upon due to the words that are thrown about by the public towards city council, state or federal government, such as corruption, dictatorship, rules don't apply, or any of the other buzzwords that are wrongly used because an individual or a group disagrees with a political body's action. I strongly suggest this type of action does not repeat itself coming from the president or any member of this body going forward. There are any number of avenues to express personal opinions, but in this chamber, abiding by the rules is paramount to proper decorum. And in closing, I ask, don't the rules apply?
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Any other council members?
Yeah,
Mr. Twist.
just to tag along with Mr. Sievert, I would have voted no also for the purpose stated on should we appeal based on taxpayers' money. So I would let you know that was my vote, would be no also.
Thank you, Mr. Twist.
Mr. President?
Mrs. Snead.
At the special council meeting held last Monday, the president of City Council chose to make a statement at the end of the business scheduled on the agenda. While he began his remarks by citing the rules of council that state that the council president shall avoid all appearance of partisanship, his statement contradicted that by commenting on items then under consideration by council and the subject of public discussion. Also, while the council president may have disagreements with the mayor and the service and safety director, he, like any member of council, can address his questions and concerns to them personally at any point. I'm not sure what purpose bringing up his opinions of their decisions and practices serves at a public meeting. I would urge the council president to avoid the appearance of taking advantage of his position and ability to control council meeting agendas to further his current political campaign. While elected officials may disagree or have different opinions, I am confident that we all have the best interest of Troy as a priority. Additionally, I hope that we would all
Mrs. Snead, continue.
Thank you. Additionally, I hope that we would all express our confidence in all of our city employees as they competently manage the day-to-day business of our successful, thriving city. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Snead. Any other council members? Any staff members have any comments? It's now time for citizen comments. If you wish to address council on any topic, you're more than welcome to come to the podium, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to consume. You are free to come up.
Mike Fox, 312 West Simpson Street, Troy, Ohio. I would like to thank you, Mr. Lutz, for having the guts to stand up to the good old boy network.
Anyone else wish to make any comments?
Steve Justice again. I'm sorry, I would like to finish what I was stating earlier. Just went too long. I wanted to apprise the council that in my view, I think it will be largely impossible for the city of Troy to avoid participating in the appeal of this particular decision that was issued by Judge Wall. I say that because the city is a party to the underlying case. I also say that because the city, as Mr. Titterington has accurately stated, recently engaged in enforcement endeavors to try to force the owner of the property to repair the property. Many of the people behind me may not realize that the cost to repair this property, an old estimate, was between $1.3 and $1.6 million. And that's an old estimate in light of inflation that all of us are having to deal with at this point in time. I'm sure the figure is higher. The bottom line is that this property is upside down. It simply cannot be repaired and the money recuperated from the situation. The only viable use for this property going forward, truly, from an economic perspective, is to tear it down, to honor its historical situation as best as can be done, and to try to provide something that will help all of the citizens of Troy and further the interests of Miami County. The city is going to be involved in this appeal in part because if the city continues to enforce its efforts, I fully anticipate that the owner of the property will engage in endeavors to try to stay that enforcement for the financial reasons that I just explained. Being an attorney and understanding how the Court of Appeals operates, I fully anticipate that the Court of Appeals will want the City of Troy to express its position. If for no other reason than the fact that the City of Troy has, I think, accurately and appropriately participated in this through its deliberative bodies to this point. Both the Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals approved the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for this property to be torn down and to be raised and for something good to be built in its place. And those decisions were made by people like us, people who are sitting behind me, as someone else already said tonight, people who looked at the facts in detail and understood the dynamics and offered the best of their hearts and their minds to the endeavor with clear heads and warm hearts. So I think that the appellate court will undoubtedly be interested in the City of Troy's position because it has supported the efforts to revitalize this property to find a good use for it going forward. And if I was on the court, I would want to know what the city's position is. The city will need to be represented by outside counsel to do that. If you wait until the 21st of this month to consider the motions, you will miss the window to be able to appeal. You will, by not acting, eliminate yourselves from at least affirmatively participating in the appeal. If I'm correct, the Court of Appeals may ask you to weigh in anyways. I don't think it's leadership to sit back and let something lapse. I think it's better for you to make an affirmative decision. You've made affirmative decisions already thus far, multiple times. Then stand behind your decisions and see this through. If you were right through the Planning Commission, if you were right through the Board of Zoning Appeals, then you're right now. And you should at least stand behind that and support the positions that you've taken previously and pay not for the attorney's fees of anyone else, but for the interests of the city that have already been spent and expressed. I thank you for what you do. I truly do. I appreciate every single one of you and your opinions on this matter, and I respect you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christy Schell. I live at, where do I live? 1205 Hillcrest Drive, Troy. I am the former president of Troy Community Works, and I want to kind of unofficially talk for just a second about the power of what a community can do for a building that is upside down. Okay, so We, as most of you know, but Troy Community Works is the organization that did the renovation of the Coleman Allen building with the support of the city, with the support of historic tax credits, and with the support of different organizations throughout the community. That is what our organization is meant to do. That is what our organization is about. When this all came to fruition about the current building, and we were in the finishing of that building. So we were not in a position in any way, state, or form to take that building on. 2 years out now, we have successfully redone that building and have we've fully been rented and occupied from a month after the completion of that building. We know what the power of this can do. I am informally stating, because I've not talked to my board at all yet at this point, but if there is a way that we can step in and start to help facilitate the gathering of, state funds, historical funds, community funds, and our own funds to move forward in this building, I'm not even sure if the owner of the building is willing to entertain another offer on his building. But if that is a possibility, we would like to give ourselves some time to put that together. This is the value of what Troy Community Works. This is why we exist. I know the TDN is the other CDC, which can hold these kind of, was one of the projects that explored buying the building prior to the demolition and those aspects. It's a different situation, a different organization. But we are a group of volunteers that this is the passion about what we do. And as you know, we put in thousands of hours to get the CAS building together. And if we were allowed to work forward in that and be the stewards of helping this building move forward, I think my entire board would be on board with that. It would also, it would be a lot of shuffling and opportunities to make that happen. So like with the CAS building, we had purchased it, and then it took us a total of 4 years to gather those funds and get that done. But I think because of the heart that is in this room, it would not take us that long to make that happen in this case. So I'm just going to offer that opportunity, and for stakeholders who are part of this to contact us and give us some idea of what that how they might be involved and help us with that, if that's a possibility. If the business owner, the problem is that we can say all of these things we care about this building. If you don't own the building, you cannot change it. And so that is the piece of the pie that everyone is trying to push, but the person who owns the building doesn't want to invest in that way. But if we had the nonprofit like Troy Community Works who owned a building, we could then help move forward and make this building what it could really do to benefit our community. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Scott McMiller, 2075 Swales Road. That was a lot to take in by the attorney back there. One thing I picked up on was the expense of fixing this building, and I want to reiterate again, a generous offer to fix that building and open that street up. There's 200 bricks up there. I've restored 2 buildings downtown. The Caroline was the first one, and that was 60 feet in the air, and I just finished the one down at Trojan Music Center. Put a whole new top on it. That's where somebody should have been looking, because that was a very, very dangerous building. This is 200 brick right here that can easily be accessed and fixed. Something that bothers me is building owners downtown have paid me good money to fix their buildings because they have pride in it, like Tom Tweed said. It's really time to get that brick fixed. That's what's wrong with that building. It's not $1.3 million. There's a lot of money, and we've all built houses and we've remodeled and we've done this. You can spend $1,000 or you can spend $100,000, depending on what you choose to do that with. That building has 200 brick that need replaced on it.
All right. Thank you.
I'll be brief. I know we've been here a long time. Jessica Meinsinger, 7 South Plum Street. I appreciate Mr. Justice's impassioned defense of Mr. Kimmel and the property and the expense to repair that property. But I think we have to remember, you as council members and we as the community, that this didn't happen to Mr. Kimmel. He purchased a historic property, knowing it was a historic property, without contingencies that it be torn down to be rebuilt into a hotel or whatever purpose he would like. So he's not a victim here. These are business decisions that he made, and he's, for all intents purposes, a successful and astute business person. So the cost to redevelop this building should have been explored in his due diligence before he closed on it.
Hi, good evening. Lorraine Wyatt at 118 South Walnut. I just want to make some clarification about the body of the people back here, the citizens of Troy. I manage the membership for THPA, and I will say that we have a very diverse area. People from California, people from all over the country are concerned about what happens to this city. I'm so proud of our membership because it's not just the downtown people. I'm a downtown person because we own a historical home. We know what it takes to maintain that home. It's expensive, but we knew that when we bought that home. We're responsible. This group back here, they have been like this for years, and we're tired. We're absolutely tired. So if we get a little angry about a couple things, Ben Southerly has been through thousands of papers, reading and delivered. I mean, it's just unbelievable the amount of information that we have gathered on all the appeals. It's amazing. So I don't know if we necessarily want to take heed of somebody that doesn't know all the particulars in this information. I just basically want to say that all of the people here are a diverse community concerned about the city. And that's just simple. We just want to keep the Troy historic and beautiful. I mean, it's real simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council this evening on any topic? Okay.
Mike Fox, 312 West Simpson, Troy High. If this gentleman over here said it would cost like $1.7 million or whatever it was to fix that building, so when he turned the estimate into his insurance company, and the insurance adjuster came down and looked at that building, did he get $1.7 million as a payoff? And if he didn't, what would the adjuster say that the real value of that building was to fix it back up again? You got to look at I can find anybody, if I got enough money, to say this would cost this or this would cost that to repair it, but there's a lot of other people that would come to there, and there's people that would buy that if he wouldn't put 3 times what it's worth on the market, knowing that nobody's going to pay that for it, so he can keep it and let it fall apart under the supervision of the city. So I think there's something really sad here, and why is there so much interest in an old building where you're fighting like this, and it would probably cost $300,000 to tear it down. So if he's got enough money to tear it down, why can't he fix it up? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address council this evening? Last chance. Our meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be Monday, November 21st, 2022, right here in City Council Chambers. Thank you.